Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. We just hit 26,000 subscribers, so if you're not subscribed already, definitely consider hitting that button because I think I have a lot of videos that you would enjoy. Now today, we're going to take a very deep dive into the Great Wall of China. We're going to be looking at the oldest known photographs of the Great Wall that I could find, and we're going to discuss the current narrative history ever so briefly. Now, I was looking at some old maps of our favorite land of Tartary or Tartaria, and I found some really interesting ones that did not include the Great Wall of China being depicted. However, I did find some that did include the Great Wall of China, and this is where we get to a great debate about when exactly this Great Wall was built, who built it exactly, and what the current narrative will tell us was the purpose of this wall. But let's begin where the narrative begins. We are told that wall building itself was familiar to the Chinese by as early as the 8th century BC. Now, the states of Qin, Wei, Xiao, Qi, Han, Yan, and Zhoushan all constructed extensive fortifications to defend their own borders. Keep that in mind as we dive a little bit further into what we are told in the history books. These different city-states within China were building these fortifications in the BC time period by using rammed or stamped earth. And this was basically stamping earth and gravel between board frames with a little bit of liquid and then allowing this to dry and compact and create these, I would say, advanced looking walls, especially for that time. And when we look at this sort of building technique that was used in ancient times in China to build the walls, we can see that we have similar ideas that have been proposed to us when we look at many other advanced walls that we have discussed around the old world. When we look at Pumapunka, for example, and we see the seamless construction of massive stone blocks that appear really so immense that it would be difficult for any human to transport them, we can start to incorporate the ideas that we're seeing in ancient China, that these were not necessarily hauled into place, but they could have been poured or molded into place. And this creates a real example of how the Chinese ancient influence impacted the rest of the old world. But I digress. We are told around 221 BC, King Xian of Qin united the kingdom of China to become the first emperor of China. And while he did this, he used these original fortifications that were built by the city-states which I mentioned earlier. And he essentially created the first Great Wall of China by interconnecting all of these city-states with one larger fortification wall. We are told in this narrative that King Xian of Qin used a build and move on technique, which seems to indicate that it was more about quantity than quality when it came to the original Great Wall of China. It was built to interconnect all of these kingdoms, but to imagine all of the empty space that would need to be connected, all of this unincorporated landscape and this undeveloped landscape that would need to be connected for this Great Wall to exist, especially in 221 BC. We have to imagine how difficult this was. So to understand that a build and move on technique was incorporated and they were building with rammed or stamped earth, we must understand that the original Great Wall probably did not look exactly like the one we see today. And we'll dive into that just a little bit further, because the next major rebuild of the Great Wall of China does not come until the 14th century with the Ming Dynasty. And just so you know, I should have mentioned it earlier, but the Great Wall of China, the one that exists today, in its entirety is over 13,000 miles long, interconnected for 13,000 miles. Now imagine, in 221 BC, this project was first undertaken. Now, when King Xian of Qin decided to build this Great Wall, if we will give him that history for a moment, we are told that he built this Great Wall to defend against the raiding northern tribes, which included the Huns. Now, in many previous videos, we have discussed the ancient people known as the Huns. And in different narratives about different locations, these Huns will be described entirely different. It's very interesting, all of the real confusion it seems we have when discussing this ancient group of people. But one thing we do know is that they can be associated with the land of Tartary or Tartaria. And again, in this Chinese Great Wall narrative, we are told that the original Great Wall in itself was constructed mainly to defend China from the apparently attacking Huns. And this is where we really get to the part of the video where I'm going to try and flip the narrative on its head for a little bit, which is really what I intend to do with most of my videos. So hopefully you will follow my train of thought here. Now, we are told for many centuries after the earliest rendition of this Great Wall, after all of these kingdoms were interconnected and the Empire of China was established, that the wall was very difficult to care for. There were subsequent dynasties that would go on to rule China. However, they would attempt to rebuild and repair the Great Wall, and they would always have issues. And within 50 to 100 years, it seems the wall was always falling back into dilapidation. That is until the 14th century and the Ming Dynasty. What's very interesting about this is we are told that the Ming Dynasty completely rebuilt the entire Great Wall of China, for the most part turning what was once rammed earth into now very intricate architecture that was built with bricks and fine masonry. However, what's more interesting, I think, is we are told that the Ming Dynasty did this directly after they drove the Golden Horde out of China. That's right, the Golden Horde of Genghis Khan, which some of us like to associate with Tartary or Tartaria. This Golden Horde was the first group of people to break through the Great Wall of China. Now, it already creates a little bit of drama there because we are told that the Great Wall in many locations was dilapidated. It was beaten down. In many parts, you could not even see the Great Wall anymore. Yet, we also have in this narrative how this real villain figure, Genghis Khan, or at least he was painted to be a villain, broke through the wall and made his way into China and raided the area. And they make it seem like he was a huge negative to the area. And yet he established what became the Mongol Dynasty in China, which would rule for over 150 years. And during this time period, there was relative peace in China. Genghis Khan was not raiding the area anymore. He had established his rule and he began to construct many different architectural projects in the area. Yet, at the same time, we are told eventually, by the late 1300s, the Ming Dynasty had come in, and the Ming Dynasty, in a great battle, had driven the Golden Horde out of China and driven the Golden Horde back behind the ancient fortifications of the Great Wall. And after doing so, the Ming Dynasty is credited with then taking these ancient Great Wall fortifications and rebuilding them. But not only did they rebuild them, they rebuilt them with great architectural style. They rebuilt them with red brick. They rebuilt them with fine masonry. And we are told this was done right after the Golden Horde left China. When the Golden Horde was in China, they themselves were building with red brick. They were building with fine masonry. They were building all of this amazing architecture, yet were led to believe that the Golden Horde was then driven out of China, and the Ming Dynasty was the one who used the same architecture as the Golden Horde to then recreate and reestablish the Great Wall. Do you see anything suspicious in that narrative? To add fuel to the fire, and I was actually really surprised that the current narrative made mention of this, we are told that none of the Europeans who traveled to China or Tartary in the 12th, 13th, or 14th centuries ever made mention of the Great Wall. We have names given such as Giovanni de Pienne, William of Rubric, Marco Polo, Odoric of Pordenone, and Giovanni de Marginoli. None of these figures, as well as any other European traveler who went into China and Tartary before the 14th century, ever mentioned the Great Wall, not even once. The first mention of the Great Wall comes to us from a northern African traveler by the name of Ibn Battuta, who also visited China in the year 1346. It is written that he heard about China's Great Wall, possibly before he even entered China. He wrote in his journal that the wall was 60 days' travel from Zetoun, and in his travelogue, Gift to Those Who Contemplate the Wonders of Cities, he associated the Great Wall with the legend that is mentioned in the Quran. This story tells of a figure, most commonly associated with Alexander the Great, who is said to have erected a great wall to protect the people near the land of the rising sun from the savages of Gog and Magog. Oddly, while Ibn Battuta could find this story being retold over and over again, he could find no one, not one single person, who had seen the Great Wall of China or who knew where its location was, suggesting that although the stories remained popular at the time, the area or location was not significant. Of all the foreign accounts that are mentioned in this brief narrative about the Great Wall of China, the one that intrigued my mind the most, and I think it'll do the same for you, is that early historians apparently believed that the Ming walls, that were the ones that were made out of brick and masonry, the ones that we see today, early historians actually believed that those were the ancient walls created by the first emperor of China. And they were actually apparently under the belief that these ancient walls were actually dug out and they had previously been covered over by earth. And I found that to be absolutely fascinating, the way it ties in with not only this idea of a flood of mud or this overpowering surge of earth that seemed to cover up many ancient kingdoms and some sort of cataclysm that ties hand in hand with that, but we actually have old, ancient foreign accounts, not those in China who said this, but foreign understanding of the Great Wall of China was that the Great Wall, as it appeared after the Ming Dynasty, was the original wall, the original first Great Wall from 221 BC, being dug out from under the earth and revealed to the public again for the first time. Modern day historians are quick to discredit this idea, and there is serious proof that the Ming Dynasty in the 14th century, using brick and masonry and other advanced techniques, did rebuild the Great Wall of China. However, whether they had help or any sort of established relationship with the Mongolian Golden Horde Scythian Tartarian Empire, in which the narrative today says they were trying to keep out, we may never know. But I do find it very interesting, all of the ties we have between the old world area of Tartary and this Great Wall of China, as well as many other discrepancies. Some in the comments and other places have pointed out that in many parts of the Great Wall, it appears that the defensive side, or the side that is being defended, is the Tartarian or Mongolian side, as if it was built on that side to keep out the people from the more southern land of China. Now, this has also been discredited, quote unquote, by modern day historians. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas in the comments down below. And just to keep you guys updated on my life, yesterday I found this guy running through traffic on like the main road in my city, and cars were just driving by. I was so shocked. Nobody was doing anything. Instantly when I saw it, I was parked at the Turkey Hill nearby, ran basically into the road because I didn't want to see this guy get hit. He clearly had not been outside for a long time and wasn't sure whose dog it was. So, I grabbed this dog and everybody's asking me questions. They're like, oh, is he safe? Blah, blah, blah. And obviously he was very, very friendly. But long story short, I'm really happy to say that I grabbed this dog, brought it back to my house, contacted the proper people, the authorities, what have you, and today the owners were able to get their dog back and he was able to get back home safely. So that was really awesome, but that did delay me making this video by a day or two. And at the same time, while I was out yesterday, just driving my friend home from work, we actually, when parked in his driveway, saw a whole family of deer. And I caught them late because I was more in awe of just watching them. I love when I see deer around here. I love being in Pennsylvania and having the opportunity to experience nature like that. But we saw this whole family of deer just casually stroll through the trees, and I could see their eyes from my headlights, but they were very far away, and I just kept sitting there, and we were sitting there just kind of observing them, and they kept coming closer and closer to the vehicle. It was just really awesome, really majestic. Now, to conclude the video, and I think this is a great way to wrap it up, this will not be photographs of the Great Wall of China. However, many of these photographs are labeled as the Tartar Great Wall or the Tartar Palace. And I found this very interesting. This is actually the Great Palace in Beijing, China. And these are some of the oldest photographs of that palace and that Great Wall which I could find. Now, just like the history that we looked at of the Great Wall, we are told that essentially this was the Mongolian or Tartarian capital for the area, and eventually this was again taken over by the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty is again given credit with creating these walls in this palace, but again, we see almost identical construction to what we see along the Great Wall of China. So I'm just wondering, do you think many of these buildings or this wall, this structure, this architecture could have been inherited from one of the previous dynasties, being the Mongol dynasty, and then recreated or reconceptualized under the Ming Dynasty? Or do you think all of this construction, the Great Wall in its entirety, all of the brickwork, and all of these other cities that were built at the same time, do you think all of that can be associated to the Ming Dynasty alone? Because I find that sort of hard to believe, but I'd like to hear your opinion and your thoughts down below. So we'll just look at these remaining photographs and let me know anything that stands out to you. You can always feel free to reach out to me at my email address or in the comments. I'll always read everything and I'll try to answer everyone. So again, please like, please share, please subscribe if you're not already, and I'll talk to you on the next video.